These icons were gods of the stage, ruling the airwaves, melting minds, and rewriting the rules of rock and roll. They ruled rock in the 1960s, with stadiums roaring, fans screaming, and the world swaying to their every note. But somewhere along the way, the spotlight dimmed, the crowds faded, and the legends vanished. In this video, we'll be taking a look at 10 forgotten rock legends who ruled the 60s, but have since been buried under decades of silence. Number 1. Syd Barrett, Pink Floyd. Syd Barrett was more than just the founding member of Pink Floyd. He was the very soul of the band's early sound. His experimental guitar playing and dreamlike lyrics paved the way for the psychedelic movement. Tracks like Arnold Lane and See Emily Play defined the era. But as the band was gaining fame, Barrett's internal battles with mental health and a growing dependence on drugs began to take a toll, setting the stage for one of rock's most tragic disappearances. In 1968, Syd Barrett's erratic behavior became impossible to ignore. After a series of increasingly bizarre performances, he was quietly replaced by David Gilmour. Syd Barrett died on July 7, 2006, from complications related to pancreatic cancer, but his legacy endures. He was 60 years old, and despite his withdrawn lifestyle, his influence looms large in Pink Floyd's later work, especially in the track Shine On You Crazy Diamond, a heartfelt tribute to him. Number 2. Arthur Lee, Love. Arthur Lee and his band Love were the heroes of psychedelic rock in the 60s. They had Forever Changes, an album so ahead of its time that it took decades for the people to truly appreciate it. Tracks like Alone Again or are still legendary. Yet while the Beatles and the Rolling Stones dominated the headlines, Love's psychedelic poetry and orchestral arrangements flew under the radar. Fast forward to the 1970s and things got, well, messy. Legal issues, a band that was falling apart, and Lee's own unpredictable behavior left Love in the dust. By the end of the decade, they were basically a ghost story. But things took a turn in the 90s. After years of fading into obscurity, Forever Changes was rediscovered by a new generation, turning Lee into a hero. He had his shot at redemption, performing his classic album live, getting the recognition he deserved. But just when things were looking up, fate dealt him a cruel hand. Arthur Lee passed away from leukemia in 2006, just a few months after his final show. Forever Changes is still considered one of the greatest albums of all time, and Arthur Lee is remembered as a true rock visionary. It's bittersweet though. He never got the mainstream success he deserved, but the hardcore fans know just how much he mattered. Number 3. Skip Spence, Moby Grape. Skip Spence wasn't just another guy in a band. He was the guy who helped shape the sound of the late 60s. As the drummer for Jefferson Airplane, and later the guitarist for Moby Grape, Spence played a crucial role in defining the West Coast rock scene. But it was Moby Grape's debut album, with tracks like Omaha, that really made waves. This was a band that blended folk, rock, and psychedelia. With such raw energy, they were supposed to be the next big thing. And Spence, he was the genius behind it all. The fame came with its problems because Spence's mental health started to spiral. Schizophrenia and heavy drug use consumed him. And by the time Moby Grape was set to explode, Spence was lost to the chaos inside his own mind. Spence passed away in 1999, largely forgotten by the mainstream, though his solo album remains a hidden gem for fans who understand his brilliance. Skip Spence's story is one of rock's greatest what could have been tales. He was there, on the cusp of greatness. The drugs and mental health issues derailed him. Number 4. Paul Revere. Paul Revere and the Raiders. Paul Revere and the Raiders were everywhere in the 1960s. Known for their wild, revolutionary, war-themed performances and high-energy hits like Kicks and Indian Reservation, they were the poster child for the rock and roll spirit of the time. Their over-the-top performances and catchy tunes made them one of the most successful rock acts of the era. If you weren't at a Raider show, were you even alive in the 60s? But as the 1970s rolled around, their theatrical bubblegum rock style started to lose its shine. The world was shifting towards more serious, introspective music, and the Raiders couldn't keep up with the changing tides. Paul Revere kept going with the Raiders right up until his death in 2014. Despite being one of the biggest rock acts in the 60s, the band's influences faded into obscurity. If you bring them up in a casual conversation today, most people probably won't know who you're talking about. Number 5. Barry McGuire.
Violence flaring, bullets loading, you're old enough to kill.
In 1965, Barry McGuire released one of the most powerful protest songs of the 60s, Eve of Destruction. With its raw political energy, it became an anthem for the times. The song captured the fear and uncertainty of the era. McGuire was a star. His gravelly voice was the perfect vessel for a generation's frustration and desire for change. But just as fast as McGuire rose to the top, he disappeared. After Eve of Destruction, McGuire tried to continue his career, but the political climate was shifting, and so was the public's interest. By the 70s, McGuire turned his attention to Christian rock, a genre that didn't exactly guarantee mainstream success. With that, his once prominent career in the public eye began to fade. Barry McGuire retired from the music business in the 2000s and settled into a quiet life in California. His name might not come up often when people talk about rock icons, but Eve of Destruction still echoes in the heart of protest music today. Number 6. Del Shannon. Del Shannon had one of the most iconic voices of the early 60s. His hit Runaway 1961 was an instant classic. A high-flying rock and roll anthem with a haunting keyboard riff that still sends chills down your spine. Shannon's ability to blend pop melodies with rock intensity made him a force to be reckoned with in the early days of rock and roll. He was supposed to be the guy, the next big star, but sometimes the brightest lights burn the fastest. The British invasion hit in the mid-60s, and Shannon was quickly overshadowed by bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. Shannon's own battles with depression and alcoholism made it even harder to maintain his place in the spotlight. Tragically, Del Shannon died by suicide in 1990, leaving behind a career that was never fully realized. Though his name may not ring out as loud as some of his contemporaries, Runaway remains a rock and roll classic, and his influence on later artists, like Tom Petty, is undeniable. Number 7. Tommy James. Tommy James and the Shondells.
Crimson and clover.
Tommy James and the Shondells were massive in the 60s. Hits like Crimson and Clover and Mony Mony blasted through the airwaves, and James' infectious energy made the band a big deal in the psychedelic pop rock scene. The Shondells' blend of catchy music and hypnotic, swirling rhythms made them the kings of the dance floor, and their music seemed to be everywhere. But behind the success was a darker side. Tommy James and his band were entangled in mob ties. His label was a front for the Genovese crime family, and the Mafia's influence was a constant threat. James himself was caught in the middle of shady deals and dangerous encounters, all while his career was spiraling. The 70s weren't kind to the Shondells, and by the end of the decade, their chart-topping hits were replaced by a slow fade into obscurity. Add in James's near-fatal overdose in 1970, and you have a rock star whose life was teetering on the edge. James didn't just disappear, though. He survived the chaos, made a comeback in the 80s, and continues to tour today. He's still rocking out, a living testament to resilience and the unpredictable life of a 1960s rock star. Number 8. Peter Green, Fleetwood Mac.
I can't help about the shape I'm in. I can't sing, I ain't pretty, and my legs are thin.
Peter Green was the man behind the original sound of Fleetwood Mac. He formed Fleetwood Mac in 1967, bringing together a band that would eventually become one of the biggest names in rock history. But it was Green's haunting, bluesy guitar work that made Fleetwood Mac's early music unforgettable. But just like many legends before him, Green's story took a tragic turn. In 1970, after a heavy dose of LSD and mental health struggles, he suffered a breakdown and was forced to leave Fleetwood Mac. His departure marked the end of one era of Fleetwood Mac, but it also sent Green into a spiral of mental health issues, psychosis, and reclusion. Green had brief stints in the 90s with the Fleetwood Mac splinter group, but by the time he was set to make a real comeback, his health had deteriorated. He passed away in 2020, after spending most of his life in relative obscurity. Despite his struggles, Green remains an iconic figure in rock history, remembered for his groundbreaking guitar work and his brief but powerful influence on Fleetwood Mac. Number 9. Jan Berry, Jan and Dean. Jan and Dean were one of the original surf rock duos, competing with the Beach Boys for dominance in the early 60s. With songs like Surf City and The Little Old Lady from Pasadena, they captured the California beach vibe perfectly. Jan Berry and Dean Torrance had the kind of carefree energy that made them popular. Surf City was one of their biggest hits, often considered the anthem of the surf rock era. But in 1966, the unthinkable happened. Jan Berry was involved in a horrific car accident that left him partially paralyzed and unable to continue performing at the same level. The crash devastated his body and his career, and though Jan and Dean tried to make a comeback, the magic that once defined their music was gone. Jan Berry never fully recovered from the accident. Though he kept performing, it was never the same, and the duo never regained their former prominence. Jan passed away in 2004, but his legacy lives on in the songs that defined the surf rock era. Dean Torrance, however, continued to perform and occasionally tour as Jan and Dean, keeping the spirit of their music alive. Number 10. Grace Slick, Jefferson Airplane, Starship. Grace Slick was one of the most powerful and captivating voices of the 1960s. As the lead vocalist for Jefferson Airplane, she helped define the psychedelic rock movement with hits like White Rabbit and Somebody to Love. Slick's powerful voice and fearless persona made her a standout figure in the male-dominated world of rock and roll. As the 70s rolled around, Slick's career took a turn. Jefferson Airplane transitioned into Jefferson Starship, and while the band remained successful, it was clear that the golden era of the 60s had passed. Slick, however, began to fade from the spotlight, deliberately. She struggled with personal demons, including battles with substance abuse, and a desire for peace that led her to retire from the madness of the rock star life. By 1989, she officially retired from music, focusing more on her art and personal life. Grace Slick has lived a quiet life since stepping away from the limelight. Her decision to step back from music, though, doesn't diminish her place in rock history. She is an unforgettable legend to true fans. The 60s gave us legends. Some burned out, others faded away, and a few simply walked off the stage on their own terms. Which of these forgotten legends surprised you the most? Drop a comment, smash that like button if you enjoyed the video, and make sure to subscribe, because we're not done digging through the wild, mysterious, and sometimes heartbreaking stories of rock's hidden history.